I love history. I'm always learning about stuff.
Today's curious kid is on a mission to find out all she can about the past.
Horrible Histories.
And this YouTube channel is a particular favourite of hers.
It's all about histories and how horrible it was.
Ugh, like to say few words.
On it, there are videos of all kinds of different people that lived a very long time ago. The vile Victorians, the groovy Greeks, and the
Savage Stone Age.
They do this stuff about cavemen and everything. But then I got to an episode where they just said English, but in a weird way, me like stuff. But I don't think that was the proper language.
Me push mammoth off cliff. Ooh, splat! Chief splattered!
Yes. Sounds a bit fishy, doesn't it? Welcome to The Conversation's Curious Kids, the podcast where a kid asks a great question and we find a very clever expert to answer it. I'm Eloise and I'm delighted to be joined by my wonderful co-host.
Hi, my name is Eva Benson. My age is 9 and I live in London in the UK.
Because this caveman video got her wondering.
How was the first language formed?
Another stunning question. Luckily, we have a super academic here with us today who studies people who lived even further back than the Stone Age.
My name is April Noel. I'm a Paleolithic archaeologist and a professor of anthropology at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada.
Welcome, April. So let's start off by defining language. Language is when we use words to communicate something, like what I'm doing right now. You understand me because we've all agreed that the sounds I'm making have particular meanings.
But there's nothing really about the sounds I'm making that tie them to what I'm talking about. So in other words, I can use the word dog, and we all know what I mean by that. But there's no reason for why we've chosen that specifically. Because, for example, in French, you can use the word chien, and it's just as good a word for dog. So it's a symbol-based system, as we would say.
And we can use these symbols to tell each other pretty complicated things. For example,
I can talk about things not just in the present or that are in front of me, but I can talk about something I've done in the past, or I can talk about something I'm going to do in the future.
And better yet, we can arrange these words in lots of different ways and we'll understand each other even if the other person has never heard them in that particular order before.
So I can say something like, my pet spaghetti monster loves pudding. And I'm assuming no one's ever said that before, or not very often, but all of you instantly have an image in your mind of my pet spaghetti monster eating pudding. So those are the things that make language so interesting and so cool and so different.
That's amazing. Eva, do you want to have a go at saying a sentence that you think no one's ever said before?
My beady hair smells like chocolate.
I love that.
That's great, because I've already got the smell of chocolate in my nose, and you can just conjure that up with just a few words. That's so cool. No other species on Earth has this means of communicating. So how did we humans arrive at this quite complex system? What form of communication did language grow out of?
I think they firstly just used actions, and then they started thinking about how they didn't really understand sometimes what they were doing, so they tried to form the language.
Yeah, absolutely. When we think about how language began, we often look to our primate cousins. We look to chimpanzees, we look to the apes, we also look to monkeys, and to kind of look at the kinds of ways in which they are communicating.
This is because we humans are distantly related to primates. Around 6 to 8 million years ago, we shared a common ancestor. It's a bit like how you and your cousin share a grandparent, but multiply it many, many, many times. So yours and a monkey's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great grandparent was the same individual. Imagine! Now back to our primates.
And so we can see that other primates use vocal calls, they use alarm calls, they use gestures. And so one sort of thing actually that's super interesting is the alarm calls of vervet monkeys. So they, for example, will have a different kind of alarm that they give depending on the kind of predator that they see. So if they see an eagle, for example, they'll give maybe a danger from above kind of call. Or if they see a snake, they'll make an alarm call for that. And everyone in their group understands what that sound means. And so they look up or they start trying to stamp on the snake.
This method of communication is perfect, as long as you live in a fairly small group.
At a certain point, your group becomes too big and you have to have another way of communicating. And so we think that once groups got a little bit bigger and societies were more complex, you needed a more complex way of communicating and bringing everyone together.
And so slowly, these calls turned into words. Let's fast forward from 6 million years ago to 400,000 years ago.
By the time we get to the Neanderthals, who are my absolute favorite human ancestor, they were probably pretty similar to modern humans in terms of the kinds of language that they were able to speak, but with some interesting differences.
The Neanderthals. You've probably heard of them. They were ancient humans, a bit like us, but slightly shorter and stockier. They are an important piece in the language puzzle.
Some people think that they had a combination of sort of symbolic words like dog versus chien or whatever.
Remember, these are words which bear no resemblance to the thing they stand in for.
Other people say they probably had a number of what we call iconic words. So words that kind of resemble what they're referring to. So, for example, words like buzz, when you're talking about a bee buzzing. And so that sounds like what it is, or doorbell that goes ding dong or something like that.
Can you think of an iconic word?
Like a roar for a lion.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Can I hear your roar?
That's awesome.
Some researchers think they had a combination of both iconic and symbolic words. But there wasn't just one version of them.
Today we have like lots of countries that speak different languages. Maybe basically what happened was there was loads of tribes that kind of just formed a language, but then they never met up with the other tribes that formed a different language. So they just kind of formed the countries with different languages.
Yeah, I think you're probably spot on there. Neanderthals were living in groups of maybe 15 to 20 people, and they were really spread out quite far. You have Neanderthals in Gibraltar, and you have them all the way as far as Siberia.
So Neanderthals all over the world were speaking simpler versions of the languages we have today. But how do we know that? That's coming up after this short break.
If you're listening to this, you're either a curious kid or you've got one in the car with you right now. Either way, you're in the right place. I'm Marshall, co-host of Tumble, an award-winning science podcast for kids and families. We start with the questions that kids are actually asking, then take them to real scientists, covering everything from animals and dinosaurs to space and cats. Search for Tumble Science Podcast for Kids wherever you get your podcasts. Keep that curiosity going.
Hello, I'm Emma from the Earth Rangers podcast. If you think that animals are amazing, then our podcast is the one for you. Join me as I travel the world to discover the wildest animal facts out there and solve nature's biggest mysteries. If you're a fan of animal expeditions like on PBS's Wildcrats and the BBC's Planet Earth, or the mystery and intrigue of Carmen Sandiego, then you'll love the Earth Rangers podcast. This is a journey you won't want to miss. Follow the Earth Rangers podcast on Apple Podcasts, and for more information, go to gzmshows.com. See you soon!
Welcome back, curious kids. So we just found out what kind of words we think Neanderthals were using. But how do we know that?
There are kind of two different lines of evidence that we can look at. So the first is biological. So we can look at the brain of the Neanderthals in terms of the size and different parts of the brain that we know are related to language.
And there are a few ways of doing this.
So one is that we can look at things that are called endocasts, and those are kind of natural fossilized brains, if you will. So basically, every time your heart beats, your brain kind of pulsates and it pushes against the inside of your skull. And I just kind of like that kind of vision of a pulsating brain. Anyways, so it leaves that impression of the outside of the brain on the inside of your skull, and you can make a cast of that and study the different regions of the brain in sort of a very general way.
I like the sound of that.
The other way is almost impossible to believe.
There are other scientists who are making mini Neanderthal brains in a lab. Basically, they're able to grow these little mini Neanderthal brains and look at how quickly they grow and develop. And that's where we get a lot of our evidence about how easily they could process language.
These mini brains are gloriously weird clues to the puzzle. But there are plenty more. So Eva, what else do you think you might look at to see how our ancestors spoke?
Our mouth. Our teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other way that we can ask that question about Neanderthal language is not only to focus on the brain, but Eva, exactly what you're saying, we can start to look at probably the most obvious place, which is like our tongue, our teeth, and so on. And the way that we can get at that area, including our voice box, is to look at a bone called the hyoid bone. So it's the only bone in the body that's not connected to another bone directly.
Instead, it is kept in place by lots and lots of muscles. And these muscles have very precise control over the mouth and tongue, which is necessary to make the particular sounds used in language.
So the hyoid bone in Neanderthals looks identical to the one modern humans have, but it's quite different from what we see with chimpanzees. So we have one fused bone, for example, and theirs is in different parts.
Which means Neanderthals could probably make all the sounds that we can. But could they also hear them?
Spanish colleagues have reconstructed the inner ear of Neanderthals, and we can see that they actually hear the same range of sounds. So all of that to say they probably could produce more or less the same kinds of sounds and hear more or less the same kinds of sounds.
So that's the biological investigation, or looking at the skeletons of Neanderthals. The other way of trying to understand how Neanderthals communicated is archaeological, so looking at what they left behind.
And so we look at evidence for the complexity of stone tool making, for example, or the kinds of art in quotes that we think they made. And some people think that those sorts of things are good evidence for needing to be able to communicate through language.
Because, for example, you probably need to tell your kids how to hunt with these tools in the same way your parents taught you how to eat with a spoon. This kind of knowledge is vital to the survival of the species. Another clue to suggest tool making is related to language lies in the way these tools were made.
So most people today are right-handed, and we know that the right side of your body is controlled by the left side of your brain. It's, the opposite.
What are you, Eva? Are you left-handed or right-handed?
I'm right-handed. I didn't know that the left side of your brain told your right hand to move.
Exactly.
Most Neanderthals were also right-handed, and we know this by looking at their tools. So some people think that after the left side of the brain developed to control the right hand, it evolved to produce language.
Because a lot of the processing for language and so on is in the left side of your brain.
That is so cool. Aside from tools, markings made by Neanderthals have been found in caves in France and Spain, which is another clue that they probably had language.
We do have what's called a graphic communication. And it's made up of different signs like circles or zigzags or things that look like arrows, but with a line across the bottom. And we don't know 100% what they mean, but they are definitely an attempt to communicate something.
Nice. What do you think, Eva? If you were starting out to write the first language, what would you write?
I write my history and about what happened to me, so I know that the people in the future can understand how things were formed and why.
That's a great idea. Of course, we have to wait a really, really, really long time for the first formal written language. You know, just about another 350,000 years or so. But maybe these Neanderthal symbols were the first steps?
There's actually, even from the Neolithic, which is 10,000 years ago, examples in China of where people were putting symbols onto tortoise shells. And what is really cool about that is that some of these little symbols that they've put on these tortoise shells are very similar to characters used in Chinese writing today. So the character for an I, for example, is virtually the same.
Wow, that's awesome. What do you think, Eva?
It might be just trying to cool away.
I think these were ones that were used on turtles after they had died. But yeah, I love that idea of trying to run after your turtle to finish writing your homework on it.
Like you go out to break for like 10 minutes and you come back in and they're all on the floor trying to chew the chairs and stuff. So you have to pick them up and choose which one is yours or remember which one is yours. Get back to writing.
That's awesome.
What would happen if you ran out of space? Would you have to get another turtle?
I think you would. You'd have to. You'd have to have a basket of turtles.
Poor turtles. Thank you so much, Eva.
Thank you.
And thank you, April.
Thank you so much. This was super fun. And it was such a great question, Eva. Thank you for sending that in.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Conversations Curious Kids. If you've got a question for us, please do email us at curiouskids@theconversation.com and we will do our best to find an expert to answer it. This podcast was made by The Conversation, a news and analysis platform bringing research expertise to the world. You can go to theconversation.com and search for Curious Kids and find hundreds of answers to questions from kids just like you. The producer for this series is Katie Flood, and the executive producer is Gemma Ware. It was edited, presented, and sound designed by me, Eloise. If you like our show, go tell a friend that scientists are making Neanderthal brains in labs. And I'll give you a bonus point if you can also tell them why. See you next time!